So yeah, everyone. So yeah, this is the 5th episode of the Rugby Recap. We have myself and the Kiwi lads. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, mate. Rugby Championship back for the final round. It's exciting, isn't it?
Oh, it's very excited indeed. Very excited to talk about this. Again, this is, like you said, the final round of this Rugby Championship. I mean, look, the All Blacks, if they do obviously win this week, they will, I guess, retain the Rugby Championship. But if for some reason the Wallabies are able to put a big shock really against the All Blacks, and I believe if the Boks get a pretty convincing win over the Pumas, then a shift could maybe happen, and obviously maybe the Boks can maybe leapfrog them. But yeah, let's just get straight into this. So we'll first discuss the Wallabies versus the All Blacks. I mean, that's probably the bigger game out of the two, I'd say, for this week. And again, we do have to remember this is the first game of the Bledisloe Cup as well. But so yeah, I mean, just first of all, what do you think about the game? Like, what is your kind of like thinking going into the game?
Well, it's almost a must-win for both sides, isn't it? Because the Wallabies, they're actually the only side in this Rugby Championship who are yet to get themselves a win after being beaten by Argentina late in that last game. New Zealand, they are sitting 2 wins from 2. If they win this one, they secure the Rugby Championship, which I'm sure will be the task that they want to accomplish first. Then having one win in the Bledisloe Cup, pretty much it's done and dusted for this year, unfortunately, due to them changing it to 2 games rather than 3. I'm still not happy about that, Tim. Why isn't it a 3-match series? Do you know why have they decided to shorten it?
I think we've had this question so many times, because the thing is that, like, if they were to do a 3-match series, it just makes more sense if they do like one within Australia, one within New Zealand, and then, in my opinion, I would do the third one in a neutral stadium, like, I don't know, somewhere maybe like Japan or somewhere in Asia, or even like America, you never know, or Europe. But it's just one of those, like, where I think if that was to happen, it would definitely add a different element to it. But the problem with it, though, is that because it's been so one-sided within recent history to the All Blacks, and I think the Wallabies haven't won the Bledisloe Cup in. I mean, when was the last time they won it? It was like it's been
I think it was about 2002, 2003.
Exactly. I was going to say, it's been a very long time since they've won that. So maybe that's another reason why maybe a 3-match series wouldn't work, because you would have to rely on the Wallabies winning. I mean, really, you would have to rely on the Wallabies winning at home, because that's where most of the time they do get the results. And obviously that's kind of like what we'll see maybe within this game maybe. But and most of the time when the Wallabies go against the All Blacks in New Zealand, I think 99% of the time you kind of expect the All Blacks to just win it kind of in an easy fashion. But hey, there are some cases obviously where the Wallabies do kind of strike back in a few games and are very close to kind of getting that, well, making the All Blacks nervous, you could say. But
well, Tim, yeah, I mean, I've been handed a note. From beside the screen. That's why I was slightly smiling just a little bit ago, and it's a note from my dad, who must have been listening to the podcast in the background. Okay. He said last time Aussie won the Cup, they changed it to a 2-match series. Fun fact. Way back in the day, it was actually a 2-match series, and then just underlined, it just says backfired at the bottom. So
that's great. Yeah.
I mean, it's been quite a while since they've had their hands on the Cup, but Eddie Jones, he seems to think that this year, now that he's at the helm, it's the time that it's going to be going back to Oz.
Yeah, I mean, like even after that, what was it? The Wallabies Pumas game. He kind of Eddie Jones in the press conference was just like, yeah, just a bit of just kind of like a, I don't know, what's it called? Like a bit of like a, what's it called?
Prelim.
Prelim. You could say this. Yeah, a prelim where he was like, yeah, the All Blacks, you better watch out. We're summing up for sleep maybe for that game. But I wouldn't have actually any doubt on that, because the thing with Eddie Jones is that he is normally, when you put him kind of back to a wall and you kind of have to he has to kind of fend for himself. He is pretty good in the situations actually, and kind of proving people wrong. And again, look, the Wallabies definitely haven't had the best start, like you said. Losing the first 2 games under Eddie Jones. In South Africa, as well as in Australia against the Pumas, which is a kind of a big loss at least. But at the end of the day, if they're going to get it, if they're going to get it right, I mean, it's really no better time to do it against the All Blacks in Australia. So I think this is probably the best situation for them to get their first kind of like win, you could say at least, for Eddie Jones. But yeah, I mean, I guess like in terms like the lineups, because we've already seen the lineups, throughout both sides. There's a lot of changes. I mean. Well, first of all, the All Blacks, because I think the All Blacks, they've made less changes compared to the Wallabies, which is, I guess, kind of expected. But at the same time, there's a few notable names in there that've made a few switches in and also switches out. So, I mean, let us know what you think in that front.
So the All Blacks, we expected them to go relatively similar in that starting side. 4-pack wise, they've only changed Dalton Papali'i in rather than Sam Cane, and I believe that is due to Kane's injury that he did get in the game up against the Springboks. Yeah, the fact that that is the only change that the All Blacks have made throughout their whole starting lineup means that they've got confidence in it. They feel like this is the team that can get the job done. Ardie Savea as the captain. You did actually predict that it wouldn't be Sam Cane as the skipper this week, as you thought he might have been coming off the bench. I like the side that they've got at the moment, though, although I would have loved to see a spot for one more player off the bench, that being Damian McKenzie. No matter what, at the moment, it just seems to be they don't want to give him that chance off the bench when they are playing Mo'unga and also playing Beauden Barrett. But they gave us a little bit of a double bluff because they were like, hey, these guys have been released into the NPC. And then they came back. Luke Jacobson, Cam Roigard, both getting the opportunity. I have to say I'm very happy for Cam Roigard. I feel like he thoroughly deserves the chance. And I'm very interested to see how he goes later on in the game. I'm just a little bit disappointed that it might be Roigard taking on Nick White rather than Roigard versus McDermott.
That's the battle you want to see, really. Exactly. Because that's the thing, is that McDermott and Cameron Roigard kind of have a similar style in terms of like how they play as a scrum half. But when you have someone like Nick White versus, I guess, Roigard, you never know. Maybe Nick White is, because you saw it within the Brumbies game when they faced against the Hurricanes, in the quarterfinals. You could say at times Nick White was able to kind of like neutralize, you could say, Cameron Roigard for most of that game. Again, I think Roigard actually did get a try, to what I recall, in that quarterfinal game. But at the end of the day, the Brumbies were the team that went through, and Nick White obviously had a lot to say in that. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in terms of that scrum half battle. But that kind of leads on to like the next question I really have for this is like really just the ones watch players, because there's a lot of players that really kind of stick out in this game. I mean, I know from my opinion, I'm very excited to see what Dalton can do in that 7 jersey, because again, to have that opportunity to just start at the number 7 is a big just opportunity overall for him, because again, like I've said, I've been very honest as a Blues fan, like where he hasn't had the season which he had last year. He was literally at an MVP caliber player. Like he was that big of a player last year for the Blues, and even though yes, we did lose in that final, he was definitely regarded as one of the better players throughout the whole season. But this season, however, he just hasn't been on the same, I guess, kind of level compared to what we saw. I'm not saying he hasn't been consistent. It's just that he hasn't put up those kind of performances, to say the least, that kind of like won the Blues like single-handedly games, really. So I really would say that Dalton Papali'i just has to kind of, I don't know, take his chance, really. But what about you? Who's your one-watch player, I guess, for the All Blacks in this game?
I'm excited to see Will Jordan once again in action because in this game, rather than up against the Springboks, this game he's facing Marika Korombedi out on that wing. And I feel like, to be honest, this is a dangerous game for Will Jordan because we've seen Marika, he's only a couple inches off getting a red card for a high shot most of the times in his tackles. And when you've got a guy who's had head troubles in the past in Will Jordan, issues with concussion, having someone who sometimes doesn't completely duck down.
The battering ram.
Charging it. Yeah, the battering ram. I mean, it works in his favour a majority of the time, though. He's a fantastic player, Marika Korombedi. But, yeah, I'm a bit worried for Will Jordan when he goes head-to-head with him. I'm liking what the Wallabies have done with the overall backline, though. Seeing a few younger guys get the opportunity. I'm sure we'll move on to that very, very soon. But, yeah, I think that once again, key players... This is where Shannon Frizzell, as another player, needs to really step up because everyone said from that last game up against the Springboks, he's our 6. So now he's got to prove that he is the consistent 6 rather than just the one-hit wonder that we see in that game up against the Boks.
I would also just like to mention like the last player just that needs kind of just it deserves a mention is really just in terms of locking position is Scott Barrett, because this is it's really key actually to see that they've actually gone with Vitalik and Barrett for this game, because even though, yes, I mean, it kind of shows you that Whitelock wasn't available in time. So that was kind of, to my credit, I was wrong on that one in terms of my prediction there. But it does show you that in a matter of like fitness level, they actually are going to go with Scott Barrett over Whitelock, even if Whitelock isn't as, because normally in the past you would actually make that adjustment to where, okay, Whitelock, even though he's not as fit, they would probably put him in anyway because he's just that crucial player. But because Barrett has just been like off the charts, you could say, this rugby championship, and even throughout the Super Rugby season, he has just been remarkable. So I think it kind of shows that he's definitely deserved to be in that starting lineup, and just happy to see that he's partnering up with Retallick. So yeah, no, good to see that from an All Black perspective. But yeah, we'll now move on then towards the Wallabies, because I think this is where a lot of this is actually, we can talk a lot more actually from the Wallabies actually, because their lineup is completely changed. I mean, they've made a number of changes, and like you said, I mean, we'll go straight to the back line first, because that's where the notable changes have been made. And we're going to start off with a 9-10 combination, a new 9-10 combination, and something which I've wanted to see for a very long time, because I always love the young duo. That's what I've always said. I've always liked a young duo, and Tate McDermott as well as Carter Gordon is the starting 9-10 for the Wallabies against the All Blacks. Like, that's crazy. Like, what do you think about this? Like, do you think it's the right move, or do you think it? I don't know. Do you think it may not pay off? Like, what do you think?
It's certainly risky to have them come in for this game, I would say. But the thing is, some of these young players, it's when the pressure's on the most that they step up to that next level. And you've got to hope that both of them are able to perform. They've gone with the experience off the bench, having Nick White and Quade Cooper there. But we know how quickly the All Blacks have been able to start their recent fixtures. So I worry that those two younger guys might end up with a little bit less confidence than they should have. Because, I mean, Carter Gordon, we saw what he could do later on in the game up against the Springboks. When he started getting that momentum flowing, he managed to get himself a try. It seemed like a real X-Factor player. And I would have loved to see him actually start at 10 in that game up against Argentina.
I agree.
But now, Eddie Jones, he's pretty much said, right, boys, this is a game that we have to win. So we're going to give you guys a chance. It's your second cap, Carter, but go out there, play like Dan Carter, and get us the win up against the ABs. It's a monumental task, but from what we've seen, he's quite a cool, calm, collected customer, Carter Gordon. So I hope that he does well. I know that the All Blacks may look to target him a little bit, try and put him under pressure, as we did see a couple handling errors for him late in that game up against the Springboks. So perhaps if they can really rush up, have a couple with a big men charging at him, might cause a little bit of the handling error, but that's nothing new for the Wallabies, because you just look at Quade Cooper and you see
exactly
90% of the performances. But in the midfield combination, Samu Karevi and Jordan Petaia, I'm glad to see that Petaia's taken that spot back in the centre duo. I'm sad that it's because Lee Nikotau is injured, but I feel like he could have a real impact here. Callaway at fullback, they're certainly throwing all of the new looks at the ABs, and it's just that question of whether that chemistry is there straight away. Hopefully it is, because I want to see a great match for game one.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I mean, really, with that Sims combination with Karevi and Petaia, I think that's probably the best combination you could have gone with, as in terms of like replacing, I guess, Len Nikotau. Because again, Len Nikotau is a very underrated player, by the way, guys, for the Wallabies. Probably you can definitely tell how much he's needed in this Wallabies side when you don't see him, kind of start, or even like just. Well, he's not just in the game in total. But yeah, I think Jordan Petaia, I think it's a good move overall, because I think he's someone who, again, I think for most of the season for the Reds, up until he had that big injury, he was playing at fullbacks. That's kind of where he's most notable, I'd say, from a club perspective. But again, he has the ability to obviously kind of like go, as we see, kind of shifting towards that 13 spot. And he definitely has the skill set to do that, because, he's a great player in terms of finding his feet, kind of finding that gap through defenses, and is very good in offloading the ball as well. And I think, like I said before his injury kind of happened, he actually really stepped up in terms of kicking as well. And that's kind of a new skill, which a lot of, those kind of outside tensors now need, because you have to kind of find those gaps within defenses and, kind of gain a bit of territory in the process. So I think he's definitely has the ability to kind of do that for the Wallabies in that position. But like you said, in terms of that back line, of course, you do have the likes of, Core Betty at the number 11, Mark Kwantawasi at the number 14, and then you have Andrew Callaway at number 15. And in my opinion, I mean, I could be wrong in saying this, but that is arguably my favorite, I think, back three. Again, this could change. Obviously, maybe after this game, maybe if it's a demolishing, then maybe could change my mind. But I think just looking at it on paper, I think that's probably the most balanced, I'd say, back three you could have gone with from a Wally perspective. And I think Andrew Kellaway, I think just him coming back into the squad now, because if I'm not mistaken, this is, let me know, this is going to be his first kind of start for the Wallabies in a long time, right? I mean, this is going to be his...
I believe so, because he was in sensational form last year, wasn't he, when he was brought in and playing extremely well. But then I think most recently he actually played in that Australia A versus Tonga game, if I'm not wrong.
That's where I saw him recently. I knew I saw him in the game, but I wasn't sure where I saw him. But yeah, I think the number 15 jersey is really his kind of best, I guess that's where he best plays. And I think he's just really known as a 15 specialist anyway. So he'll be pretty calm, I think, under pressure, I'd say, in that position. Again, we've seen obviously Tom Wright being given a go in that, but it hasn't really worked out for him, and he hasn't been able to really kind of transition his, I guess, form from club level with the Brumbies compared towards the international level with the Wallabies. So I do think Andrew Kellaway is probably better suited in terms of that 15 spot for the Wallabies. Again, I mean, remind me, do you know who's off the bench in terms of like the backs? For the
so they've got Nick White, Quade Cooper, and also Isaiah Parisi as the midfield replacement.
Okay, I like that. Okay. I'm just trying to think, how could that work then? Maybe like you put Bataille then maybe as the cover 15 if you needed to, then Parisi maybe as the 13 option, and then if you wanted to put Quade Cooper on as a replacement 10 for Carter Gordon maybe in the second half. That's maybe what they may do there. But
they could also look at Bataille as a wing option if there is an injury there.
I
believe Carter Gordon could also transition to 12. So they've got the selections that they've gone with make a lot more sense, I think, than what the All Blacks have gone with. Just we didn't really mention them about going with Anton Leonard-Brown and Caleb Clark as the two off the bench. But yeah, it seems like the ones that they have chosen make sense for the players they've got on the field so that they're able to just do little adjustments. Like we could see Karevi, maybe he plays 13.
I was going to say,
once Isaiah Parisi comes on the field.
Interesting to what you said, like with Carter Gordon maybe as a 12 option. By the way, this is also going into the second half, maybe if they make changes, just keep that in mind. But if you had you had maybe Nick White maybe coming on for Tim McDermott, then you had Quade Cooper at the number 10, gives you pretty good experience, I'd say, in those 9-10 combinations coming off the bench. Then you have Karevi, who maybe shifts then towards the 13 option then. And then, Carter Gordon at 12. I like that. And then if you have to, then you can obviously, depending on what you said because the thing is that Mark Nora-Kwantawasi can also play 15 if needed. It's not probably his best position, I would say, because it's similar towards what I'd say with Tom Wright, where I don't think 15 is really his best position. But I know from a club perspective, that's where I think he does normally play as the 15, right? For the who plays, because it's normally gosh, I lost his name. Ben Donaldson, right? Is it Ben Donaldson?
Yeah, he also plays a bit of fly half. They kind of really switch it around.
They do switch
for a few of these Aussie sides, and it builds versatility, but then it can also cause confusion.
And that's
for players when they're trying to work out
exactly
where they're supposed to be.
And what I was going to say though is that even though there's a lot of versatility within that Wallaby back line, do you think that also kind of hinders the chemistry you want to build in terms of making sure the players know their position in and outs? Because at the end of the day, you kind of want to be in a position where that player is in that position no matter what. And I think what the All Blacks have done, and I know I'm talking about from a forward perspective, but they have now guaranteed now. I think they've now selected their loose forward pack for the World Cup. They've now 100% have that now with Shannon Brazil, Sam Cane, and Ernest Fiat. That is 100% going to be their starting loose forward trio. They've got that confirmed now. Because that was obviously a big issue, which they just weren't able to kind of confirm over a long period of time. They've now finally done that just in time before the Rugby World Cup. The Wallabies, however, still haven't been able to do that, and you can still see that for the back line. They're making changes in and out. So we'll have to wait and see if that obviously does come into their favor. I mean, I guess in terms of the forward pack, kind of just alluding towards the forwards. Again, they've made a few changes in there. I mean, again, Michael Hooper, I thought he would be available for this game because, I mean, I was watching his podcast with, what was it? What's it called? The Good, the Bad, and the Rugby, but with the Australian version of it with Matt Gittu and all of them in there. And he was saying on the pod that he actually could be available for a test, but it seems that he's not going to be. Well, he's not on the bench, right? I would just be clear. He isn't on the bench.
He's missing for this one, Michael.
It's crazy. But again, we do have another Hooper, obviously, in his place, though, with Tom Hooper and the number 7 jersey. And I think, Rob Valentini's at the number 8, and then you have Jed Holloway, I believe, at the number 6. And they've actually brought back Nick Frost, which is a big call, actually, because in my opinion, I actually didn't think he had the best of game, actually, against the Springboks in the opening round. But I do think that's kind of like what I would choose, though. And if I go over Wallaby locking deal, because Will Skelton is just a big, he has a ton of experience under his belt, and he's a big unit. He's going to add that kind of height towards that squad, which is much needed, really. And Nick Frost is just he's such a he's really a young lock, actually, when you think about it compared to the I guess just overall in World Rugby, like who's at the stage where they're getting starting opportunities. Because I mean, the next best lock you can say, you could say like maybe Tupou Valley, but there's not really a young lock I can think of now that is getting that opportunity. I mean, is there one you can straight away think of out of the top nations that are now going to get an opportunity to start?
I'd love to see Tuolangi for France get an opportunity in the future, but he's not quite there yet. But he's close, I think, with the way that he played in the under-20s comp.
I think most likely he'll come in maybe after the World Cup, because I think that's kind of a good transition for him. But I think just Nick Frost, I think that's kind of a player I'm looking out for in this game. But what do you think about that forward pack? Do you think that's a good forward pack they've chosen overall? Or do you believe there's some players that could have made it, which you think were just, just are very unlucky to not get in?
I think I was a little bit surprised with no Mick Wright. So I assume that is injury-based, because Tom Hooper, in that game up against the Springboks, he didn't have the greatest start in international rugby. He also ended up with that shoulder injury.
Exactly.
Which did mean that he went off the field relatively early. I'm curious to know how it works, because I think the main talking point that I've seen from the social media side of things when talking about that loose forward trio is they're saying Tom Hooper, he doesn't normally play 7. So it's a little bit of a risk playing him out of position in a game up against, anyone, let alone the All Blacks, who are sitting 2 from 2. It's going to be a big challenge for Angus Bell, but I feel like that's the kind of challenge he'll enjoy. He's just getting himself back into that Wallabies jersey after I believe he had a relatively long injury layoff too, didn't he?
Yeah, he was out for a very long time. But the thing, though, is that Angus Bell is actually I think he's one of the best props, actually, or a very underrated prop in the international scene. I'm not going to say he's one of the best, but he's a very underrated prop for sure. And I think like with him starting, I think he's in with Alan Aratoa, I believe, is the number 3. But very excited to see, obviously, Taniela Tupou, obviously back now. I mean, again, he did get a bit of game time against, I believe, Tonga in that Australia A game. But now he's going to obviously come back into the Wallabies, coming off the bench, which I think is probably the best really introduction for him, kind of back into the Wallabies, because to put him straight into the starting lineup is, I think, probably a bad idea, just because he's probably one player where you need to kind of give him an opportunity with minutes first and then allow him to maybe start later on. But I like it. I like it overall. I mean, again, they haven't really made too many changes, I guess, from the forwards, because I know that there's Richie Arnold, I believe, off the bench in terms of locking option. They have there's starting. As I was saying, Rob Leota is the other one. I think that's a big call. He's someone who I think could have actually played in this game. I think he maybe would have been better suited, right? Maybe in this game, but
maybe
again, he's really more than 6.
Yeah, but Tom Hooper is too, so it's fine.
Yeah, they're playing with 2 6s really in this game. 3 6s really, because Rob Valentini can also play 6.
6. Dangerous game. But Eddie Jones, he's the type of guy who likes to take those risks, isn't he?
Yeah.
And if it works, everyone goes, okay, he was on to something. If it doesn't work, I mean, the media already is ripping into him after that very first game up against the Springboks, so he won't mind that much more that they're getting angry at him now rather than, at the World Cup.
I just don't think there was much you could really do in that situation against the Boks, because you're playing them away in your first game. So it's one of those where I kind of gave him a pass on that one, because it's really more just one of those games where you don't expect them to win it anyway. But if they can show a bit of, I guess, like ambition and drive in that, then you can take that into the next game. But the problem with that, though, is that there was nothing from that game I saw from the Wallabies except Carter Gordon, really, at the end of that game. And then going into that Pumas game, which you're kind of expected to win because you're playing, in front of a home crowd. I'm not going to say they choked it, because they really came back into the game actually at the end, but they just allowed the Pumas to play more of their game really and gain more of the momentum throughout it. So Yeah, they just got to make sure that, because when you look now at both games, because we'll talk about it on a whole now, really just in terms of this game. I mean, from a Wolves perspective, I mean, when you look at both the Springbok game which they played, it was really more about the set piece and all that which let them down. And then in the second game, it was really just more about their just I guess like just holding on to possession really and just making sure that they make less mistakes. So it was really more. It was kind of two different kind of reasons why they kind of lost the game. And I think they have to learn that they have to make sure that they don't do any of that going into this All Blacks game. So it's one of those where it's going to be tough because again, look, the All Blacks are one of the best teams, I'd say, in the world in terms of set pieces. In my opinion, they're probably the best team. I'd say I still say they're the best team in the world in terms of lineouts. Just there's no better team. I mean, you can maybe see Ireland because they really do have a good set piece in terms of lineouts. Yeah, Ireland actually. Oh, now that I think about it, maybe Ireland is still maybe first, but New Zealand is no matter what going to be always in that top two. But again, scrums, they're always pretty good in that perspective as well. And very recently, with the introduction of Ethan de Groot and Lomax, they've been winning a lot of scrums with that, I guess, that propping duo. So, yeah, it's going to be very fascinating to see if the Wallabies can stop that. But, yeah, let me know, I guess, just in terms of, I guess, a prediction overall. Like, what do you think for this game? Do you think it'll be a pretty close margin, or do you think I guess, it may go one way? Like, what do you think?
Do you want my prediction of what I want the score to be, or what I think the score?
You know what? You know what? Because I'm feeling generous. Give me a prediction for both ways. So what does your heart say, and what does your brain say? That's gonna let the way I like to say.
Okay. Well, I want this game to be close, of course, because the Bledisloe Cup, I feel like the next game has nowhere near as much hype for it if this game is All Blacks win by 15. It's just not, I guess, feasible for the series to be hyped up for that next one, even though we might get to see a couple whole new look sides from both teams. I think in this one, the All Blacks are going to start fast, although the Wallabies, they seem to not go too badly in that little first patch of the game, similar to what they did up against the Box. They actually started
They normally
well,
score the first try. That's the thing. Like they actually normally scored. So,
and the All Blacks last year or the year prior, I believe they went through a real phase of conceding the first try, kind of back to back to back to back in games. I think all throughout the Irish series, they were second to score in all of those games. But see, for this one, my brain's telling me about a 15-point margin, but I would like to see it close. But the problem is a little bit similar to some games we've seen in the past. If it's going to be close, the underdog has to win it, because or else then people go, yeah, but they didn't get the win. And, if it was a 3-match series, I'd say it would be great for the Wallabies to take out the first one, mainly because then New Zealand more than likely win the second, and then we have a third that's the decider.
Yeah.
But the problem is, if the Wallabies win this first one, they've still got to win the second one in New Zealand to draw the series. They don't win it if it ends up being the ABs winning on home soil. So I'm going to say I'd love to see it decided by less than 5 points, but I'm saying the All Blacks by 15.
Okay, so All Blacks 15 is your final prediction. Is it locked in?
No. We'll go either 14 or 16, because even numbers are different
from
the score up against the Box.
But somewhere within the margin between 14 and 16 is what you're saying towards the All Blacks. Okay, I like that. I mean, I was actually looking at a few stats before this, and I saw that, when it comes towards the Wallabies and, the All Blacks, I saw that 60% of the time, when you host it, normally the team does actually win. But actually, no, what was the other stats? Maybe because I saw it was 60 and 40, like where it's like, actually, no, yeah, it is 60% of the time where if you are the home team, you actually win the game between these two sides in the last, I think, 5 fixtures to what it was. But in the 40%, though, it was that whoever scored the first try won the game, and that was only 40%. Okay. So, and I think so it really depends on what will happen. I mean, like you said, even if the Wallabies do get the first try, they're still at a disadvantage, because in the previous 5 games, it's only been 40% that's really mattered. But of course, the other stat kind of goes in their favor, because if you're the home team, you're seen more as a favorite in terms of, I guess, like the previous 5 games. But
and at the MCG, they've actually got a better winning record than the All Blacks. I think it's 2 wins, 1 loss at the MCG.
That's what I think it is, 2 wins, 1 loss.
You know, that's 66%. You mentioned your 66% just before. Is it all? There's a lot of sixes going on, Tim.
Yeah.
Controversy.
Well, I thought it was 60%. 60% in terms of the home
60.
wins. So that's in the last 5 games. But again, that's obviously in different stadiums. But you are correct in terms of this stadium, however, it's probably around 66% because they've won two games to 1. But yeah, look, I kind of similar to you, like where I think I really do want the Wallabies to win this. I mean, look, at the end of the day, I think when it comes towards this fixture, I will always be supporting the Wallabies just because it's one of those like where I want to see them at least win the first. I mean, actually, I just want them to retain the Bledisloe Cup. I mean, that's kind of what I want to see, just because it makes it more interesting, I think, for the next year. Then the All Blacks, come into it, then they kind of raise the level essentially, or raise the bar. So that's kind of what I want, kind of want to see. But yeah, look,
you also made a comment though in one of our predictions, didn't you? How you said you wanted the Wallabies to win, to just give that helping hand to the Springboks,
exactly,
possibly win the Rugby Championship. So,
this is where I kind of like, I'm making sure I'm not thinking from a bot perspective. I kind of just want to think like, what would I want if I was watching the Rugby Championship, and what would be best for the Bledisloe? Again, it does obviously kind of link towards my bot perspective, where I want the Wallabies to win. But similar to you, however, I do think the All Blacks may just win this. But I actually don't, because the reason why, maybe I'm going to be completely wrong in saying this, but I actually don't think it'll be as high as, like, it won't be a high margin game. Essentially, it won't be over like 15 points. That's why I just can't see it. I can't. If it does, then jeez, the All Blacks are going to be in a very good place, like a very good place going into this Rugby World Cup. But I mean, I just kind of expect the Wallabies to kind of just give it their all, really. And the thing is that with a lot of experience coming off the bench, I think that kind of comes into the Wallabies' favor as well. Because again, with the All Blacks, like you said, I mean, you have Anton Brown who's going to come in, hasn't played a game in a while, so he may be a bit rusty, maybe coming off the bench. Kyle Clark, I mean, he may come on. I mean, the only logical substitution would be from Mark Talea, but it's just going to be one of those where it really depends on how the game's going at that point in time. So yeah, it's going to be fascinating. But I think for me, I'm going to say the All Blacks will win, but I'm going to say they'll only win it by a small margin of, I'd say, 6 points. I'm going to say the All Blacks will win by 6 points. I think that's kind of like I'm still favoring the All Blacks, but I think the Wallabies will at least improve on what we saw in those previous 2 performances. Because, again, I mean, they lost it by how many points against the Pumas? It was like a 2
it was only like 2 points.
Yeah, so it was a very tight margin. But against, I mean, look, when you're facing the All Blacks, it's a completely different game. They bring obviously a very fast intensity straight off the back. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens, I guess, within the opening 20 minutes if the Wallabies are able to kind of better handle themselves compared towards the Boks. But yeah, that kind of moves on then, obviously, then towards the second game around. Again, we kind of have less to talk about this. I think there's less to talk about really from this game, because I think there's less kind of riding on it, I guess, in terms of like the Rugby Championship, as well as just not having a Bledisloe Cup to worry about. But I know in terms of the Springboks Pumas game, so we've already had the Boks announce their squad for the Rugby Championship for this round. But going into this, the Pumas still haven't announced their squad, guys. So just keep in mind when we're talking about the Pumas, they haven't announced their squad. But what do you think from a bot perspective? Like in terms of the lineup already, they made a lot of changes. We didn't actually get a lot of them right, by the way. Now that I look back at it, which is not good from our perspective. But what do you think? Like, what do you think about the changes they've made?
I think it's interesting because I know you mentioned a little bit earlier on as well about all the injuries that they've got behind closed doors. All those players that are struggling a little bit, hopefully all going to be fit heading into that Rugby World Cup that is not too far away. I like the fact that they've gone with a little bit more experience in some positions, just because they know that this is an important game, because even though the Rugby Championship may not be on the line for it, second place is. This could be one of Argentina's highest finishes in a long time if they are able to get themselves the victory over the Boks. The problem is they're playing in South Africa, which, as we know, is not an easy task for any travelling side. But, I mean, Argentina, after that win last week, they'll be feeling passionate, they'll be feeling prepared. They'll be possibly looking at switching up a few players in their lineup as well. But I'm looking forward to seeing, hopefully, like we said, the squad hasn't been announced yet for this game. I keep on refreshing Instagram, seeing whether or not the lineup has come out. They still haven't. I mean, all we've seen is a few kicking options, which seems to be Juan Cruz Malia. He's been doing a little bit of kicking, so perhaps he comes back in as the number 15 in this contest. I assume they will stick with Carreras in the starting lineup. I feel that has been working pretty well for them. And I'd love to see Rodrigo Isgro get another opportunity out on the wing. But for the Box, they've given the people what they wanted, and that was Kurtley Arinze. After the head-to-head between Arinze and Makazole Mapimpi, the comparison between the way that the two players played in their last performance, you know, he had to go Arinze once again, get in the crack. Willie Leroux, though, keeping that consistency of having him at fullback, but Mani Lebok takes a spot back at fly half. So I'm liking what they're doing there. It worked well having Lebok and Willie Leroux in the same backline in that game up against the Wallabies. But I guess asking you about the 4-pack, we've seen Malcolm Marx added into the starting side. We've seen Marvin Ori get the opportunity at number 5. That was certainly one no one was predicting.
No one saw that coming, yeah.
And then the loose forward trio. Back to Van Staden, back to Peter Steph de Toy, and of course, big Dwayne Vermeulen at the back. What you thinking of it?
Yeah, I mean, first with the 4-pack, I mean, yeah, the big change there that kind of I was like, well, I was just happy to see was Malcolm Marx getting the starts against Argentina, because I think if you want to kind of I don't know, make the switch now in terms of making Malcolm Marx essentially get the opportunity to start in these games, I think you have to kind of give him those minutes now. You have to kind of prepare him for it leading up into the Rugby World Cup. So I think it's what was needed, and I think just it should be a good kind of game for him to kind of get him kind of rolling in the right direction. But I think in terms of locks, I'm again very surprised as you were, I guess, in terms of Marvin Ore. I mean, again, we both. I think I went with second with RJ Simon, I think, for this game, and you probably went with Lord Diego, but we were both wrong in that aspect. Marvin Ore, just good to see. I think it's a good game for him actually to get an opportunity. I just thought maybe next week when they face against the Pumas in Argentina, that's probably I thought that was the better game for maybe him to do it in. But hey, no, it's good to see obviously him getting some more minutes in the Rugby Championship. So credit to him. I guess in terms of that loose 4-pack, it's kind of what I wanted at the end of the day. The only switch was really just well, there was actually 2 switches actually, because I did predict Marco van Staan to start at 6. I was happy with that. But Peter Toy, I believe I think I said it would come off the bench, but I was very 50-50 with that, because I think who was it? Was it Quagga Smith, I think, who I was kind of debating with? I think there was a few changes in there, but I know the big one, of course, which I did kind of say at the end of the day, I'm pretty happy with either way it happens, is if it's Dwayne Vermeulen that starts or Jasper Wiese, and they've gone with Dwayne Vermeulen. I mean, Jasper Wiese isn't even in this lineup, which is interesting to see. But again, we do have to remember that the Box have gone with a 5-3 split this time compared to their normal 6-2s. So I think Dwayne Vermeulen, just good to see what he can do, because again, it looks like he could be playing a full 80 within this game, because there's not really any backup for him. Because I mean, the only back really that you have kind of the cover is really RJ Steinman, and to what I recall, I mean, you only have Peter Toy, maybe who can kind of cover his position, or I don't know how they'll do the switches there. But I know from a backline perspective, very excited to see what Grant Williams can do. So good to see him getting a start in this game with Manny Lebok, which is, I guess, from our perspective, we both kind of saw that coming, because he kind of deserves to get that number 10 jersey a bit more until, Pollard obviously is back and fully healthy. But I think in terms of the centers, I mean, Dwayne Vermeulen, Jesse Krill, nothing wrong with that. Pretty happy to see what's going to happen with that, and probably the right idea, because we both kind of mentioned how the Kanuam isn't in the best of form compared to what we've seen previously. So I think it was a much needed change, I think, just for this game. And then probably the big change is really just seeing Kurtley Arinze and Chazan Kobe, the starting wingers, and probably what a lot of Box fans, as well as just global rugby fans, really just want to see overall, because them two just they will definitely bring a lot of speed, you could say, towards those wingers, but towards that outside channels really. But I guess in terms of the ones watch player for both these sides, I mean, again, keep in mind obviously the Pumas haven't announced theirs, but who do you say is a ones watch player for both sides from a Box and Pumas perspective?
Well, for the Pumas, we have to assume that certain players are going to be there.
Yeah, exactly.
And for me, I mean, I said about him, Rodrigo Isgro, the way that he was able to run over the top of Marika Kurambedi out on that wing and anyone else that was in front of him is something we don't see too often. And I believe that is from that sevens setup of being able to pretty much one-on-one. It's always your job to beat that one guy in front of you. And Rodrigo Isgro was showing time and time again that that can be pretty effective when you're a slightly bigger individual out on that wing. He'll be going head to head with more than likely Kurtley Arinza, who was actually going to be my key player to watch out for the Springboks. So I feel like that is a chess battle between those two.
I like
that
it.
really only one of them can get the checkmate, and the other one may unfortunately get left out of their side in future games, depending on who steps up the way that they need them to. But in the 4-packs, I mean, if Matera's there, we know that he's going to be physical in the way that he plays. For Argentina, I'm trying to think of who they're going to go with in that loose forward trio, to be honest, because I think Rodrigo Bruni's actually impressed me quite a bit
He's
in the
been
last
very
two
impressive.
games.
Yeah.
But then they went from playing him in the starting lineup up against the All Blacks, where he was probably one of the best forwards, to having him off the bench in the next game because they wanted Juan Cruz Malia to start at number 8. So I think if Bruni's in the starting lineup, got to keep an eye out for him. For the Springboks, I think Malcolm Marx. The end of the day, everyone's talked about for so long, this man needs to be the starting number 2 rather than coming off the bench late. And yes, he's had such an impact coming off the bench in the later stages of the game, but it's whether or not he can find that rhythm straight away. And then I think that also brings more pressure on Bongi Mbonambi, because it's also that question of, can he step up coming on to the game late? Can he get that line-out throw correct? And can they keep that momentum rolling that Marx is able to create? Although I feel like Malcolm Marx, they're going to play him 70 minutes anyway. To be honest, I think he's going to be out there for a very long time.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm very similar to you, actually, because, I mean, the two key positions which I'm looking at in this game is really the hookers, and I'd say the fly-off position, because with the hookers, I mean, it's really you have Malcolm Marx and Bongi Mbonambi versus Julian Montoya and Augustine Karevi. That's kind of what I would predict in terms of the Pumas side, and I think that's a great battle overall, because you really have 4 very good, hookers there. So it's going to be very interesting to see who kind of wins those battles in terms of, I guess, in terms of the minutes they have for each side. But in terms of the fly perspective, I mean, Manny Libok versus Santiago Caceres will be very exciting to watch, because I think those two have a very, I believe they have a very similar style of play, actually, just in terms of how they like to kind of like break defenses. Like they like to go by it for themselves, but they're very good in finding that offload as well. So it's going to be interesting, because, again, you can maybe say Manny Libok's definitely the better kicker out of the two, but I do think Santiago Caceres is, maybe you could arguably say, a better player in terms of finding that, like, I guess, that space in terms of going towards the back line, because he is really known for that. It should be really interesting to see what happens, of course, in this game. I guess in terms of the prediction, I mean, I'd love to say the Pumas will win this. I'd love to say they would, but I'm just feeling that the Boks will be too strong for them. So I'm kind of hedging my bet towards the Boks in this game. And again, we do have to remember that they're playing at home. I believe they're playing at they're playing at Ellis Park, if I'm not mistaken, right? In Johannesburg. So I think they should have it in their in the bag. So I'm gonna probably go with Boks win. I do think this could be a high margin. I think it could be one of those games where it could be like 38, like 14, something around like there. That's kind of what I think, and that would arguably get a bonus points if that were to happen. So I kind of think, we'll just say like what is it? Is that 15 or even higher? It's like a 20.
High, that's 24 points.
I'll just say higher than 20 points. That's kind of what I'm saying for this. That's kind of what I'm saying for this. And that's obviously going towards the Boks and what I'm predicting. But what about you? What do you think for your prediction?
See, my brain's also leaning heavily in favour of the Springboks. I kept on thinking, 13-point margin, but then, if that backline's firing and the forwards are being physical, that could easily be a lot more than the 13.
Yeah.
It's going to be very tricky to tell what kind of Argentina side's going to show up, though, because, maybe they just have a new fire lit underneath them, which they may need, because Ellis Park recently had snow, so it'll be a bit chilly down there. So, you want to make sure you're handling the ball well and you're just keeping it in the forwards, keeping that position rolling, because if you're defending and it's chilly, it's a long day at the office, that 80 minutes. But I would say, I'm between a 13 and about a 20-point margin for the Springboks in this game. I hope it's closer once again, similar to the All Blacks versus Australia game. But, if the Pumas do lose this game by a little bit more, does that mean they just go a little bit more as a dark horse into that next Rugby World Cup? where they could cause a couple upsets.
Hey,
They're
you
not
never
looking
know.
like a bad side, you know.
I
Interesting times ahead.
Yeah, I really want them to do well. Again, I don't want to talk more about the World Cup because I think we can kind of discuss that more in terms of another podcast. But yeah, I think like other than that, I mean, we do also. I mean, we'll quickly actually just mention the Pacific Nations Cup actually because I feel like we have to kind of do that bit of justice because we haven't been able to kind of cover that throughout the last few weeks here. Well, just because the podcast only obviously, as you guys most of you know, only started recently. But yeah, I guess more because you've seen more of the games compared to me in this instance. Like, what do you think in terms of like the games overall? Like, have you been pretty impressed?
I mean, there's definitely been key elements of every team's game that needs worked on, which I've enjoyed picking up on throughout that first round of the Pacific Nations Cup. For Fiji, it's that rolling maul defence.
Yeah.
For Tonga, it's that line out, trying to get that a little bit more consistent, which was ironic, seeing as that was how they were actually scoring
Exactly, I was going to say.
quite a few of their points, but they still didn't have the best percentage in terms of the amounts of wins that they were able to get per line out. Samoa and Japan, those two sides had 28 handling errors combined in their game, which was not ideal, but the Samoans actually walking away with the victory over Japan in that game. So that would have built their confidence up this weekend. It's going to be Fiji versus Samoa. Now, anytime that has happened in the sevens, it's always a great time. I feel like rugby union, it's going to be no different, and it's a great testing point. We get to see a few new players come in, like Stephen Luatua for Samoa, going to get the opportunity. Christian Liliafano, after his performance last week for the Samoans, definitely looks like that fly half moving forward. And then for Fiji, a few of those Fijian Drua boys, Asefo Masi, Kalaviti Ravovo, Dedi Alangi, all getting in action.
It's just great. It's going to be a great match.
It's going to be exciting.
And the thing is that, like, with that, I mean, if I'm not mistaken, actually, with that Japan win over, with Samoa's win over Japan, it's actually the first time I think I saw, maybe it's the first time since 2000. Well, actually, you have to maybe remember the year if you know it, but it's the first time they've made the top 10 in the world rankings. I think it's like 2018 or it was something
been a long time.
It was crazy. I was like, geez, like maybe it may actually be even before that. By the way, guys, I think maybe it's like 2010 or something. It was a long time ago since Samoa have actually made the top 10, which is kind of crazy to think, really, because really with the Pacific nations, I mean, you have Fiji, Samoa, and Tonga, and at the end of the day, I'd like to think in history, you probably say Fiji at most times are probably the team that kind of edges it out of those three in terms of the world rankings. But hey, credit to Samoa, by the way, because like to make it into the top 10 and obviously kind of deplace, kind of Japan in the process is a massive achievement. And again, you have to remember these two sides are in the same group for the Rugby World Cup as well. So it's going to make it even more fascinating to see if Japan kind of get the revenge really on Samoa, or Samoa are kind of able to kind of just hold strong really. So yeah, it'll be really fascinating to see what happens in that front. But yeah, that's kind of it really with this podcast, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed the episodes. Again, thank you obviously towards the Kiwi lads for coming on, and yeah, just again, we'll kind of give you guys our next podcast, I believe, on. I think will be released on Monday, if I'm not mistaken. And guys, let us know in the comments, by the way, if you guys like this pre-recorded version, because this is the first time we've chosen to do a pre-recorded version for our preview rather than a live one. So let us know if you think this format is a much better way of kind of just giving you guys, I guess, our opinion of, or just of rugby in general. But anyway, just other than that, yeah, just we'll see you guys next time.